Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Caregiver Support Program's annual Spring Mini Conference. This year, our theme is Nourishing the Caregiver, Mind, Body, and Spirit. I'm your host, Kathleen Koenig-Stoffel. I am the Caregiver Program Manager, and with me today is my co-host, Nicole DiGilio, Caregiver Specialist for Outreach and Education. Standing in the wings is our supportive communications team, who is here to help you with any technical issues. Thank you again for joining us and taking time for yourself today. Self-care is so important in everyone's lives, but especially the caregiver. It is not selfish to take time out for yourself. It is vital. In order to bring quality care to our care partners, we must first put that oxygen mask on ourselves before we can help them, as we would in an emergency situation on an airplane or anywhere else in the world. Caregiving is not easy, not for the caregiver and not for the care recipient. It requires sacrifices and adjustments for everyone. Often, family caregivers must juggle work and family responsibilities and take time to manage it all. Caregiving can also be rewarding. Many people find that caregiving provides a sense of fulfillment in that they feel useful and needed. But the ongoing demands of caregiving can be a strain even on the most resilient person. Caregivers who don't spend time taking care of themselves are less likely than others to get preventative health services, such as annual checkups. They tend to have high risk of physical and mental health issues, sleep problems, and chronic health conditions such as high blood pressure. They're even at risk for premature death. That is why it's so important for you to take care of yourself and why we created this conference for you today. We have a wonderful lineup of speakers. I'm going to share my screen with you. And everyone should have received the agenda for today. The speakers will be sharing their experience and expertise on nourishing the soul of the caregiver. We know that time is precious for caregivers, and so we hope you follow along with the agenda, but if you need to pop in and out today, that is perfectly fine, but we're hoping that you're able to stay for the full conference today. The conference is being recorded, so you can always pop in later to view that recording. Some housekeeping before we start. Everyone is on mute, but there will be an option to unmute at the end of each presentation. We will be monitoring the chat. There is in the bottom right corner of your screen is the chat box. So it looks like a speech bubble. We'll be monitoring that, and we will be asking your questions to the presenters from that chat box. Also be a survey link in the chat box. We hope that you see that. We'll be posting that twice today, and hope you'll take time to fill out the survey. The survey is very important for feedback for our program, so we can gear services and supports and events with caregivers' needs in mind. Technical assistance with our wonderful communications team. You can contact them at 410-887-2002. The closed captioning button is on the left corner of your screen, labeled CC. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the new director of the Baltimore County Department of Aging, Hyung Tan. Prior to coming to the county, Hyung was the Deputy Commissioner of Aging and Care Services at the Baltimore City Health Department, starting her career as a community health worker and being a family caregiver for her grandparents. Hyung is a longtime public health and community advocate for older adults and caregivers. Additionally, she is a strong voice for older adults on the national level, serving on the U.S. Aging Board as well as other boards and commissions. We are proud to have her on the BCDA team. Welcome, Director Tan.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Good morning, everyone. It's truly such an honor to be here to welcome you to our annual Caregivers Conference. I'm especially excited to be here for the first time as the department's director. Although I've been here for only a couple of months, I bring over 25 years of experience in the health and human services field. And the one thing that has remained true throughout my entire career, it's the value of learning alongside others who deeply care about the work that we do. That's what today is all about, coming together to learn, to grow, to strengthen how we can support caregivers and the older adults you care for. For me, as Kathleen mentioned, caregiving is deeply personal. I grew up in a multi-generational household where my grandparents helped raise me, and as they grew older, I helped care for them. It was, like many of you, a very humbling experience. I learned a lot, and our family was very fortunate to be able to care for my grandmother in particular at home as she lived with Alzheimer's for 10 years. This experience shaped how I approach the work in aging and why I'm so passionate about building better systems of care for caregivers. The scale of caregiving today is enormous. In Maryland, more than 760,000 unpaid caregivers provide about 700 million hours of care, and that's valued at $12.5 billion annually, according to ARP. Most caregivers are women, and nearly 60% work full-time or part-time while caring for their family and loved ones. These sacrifices are often invisible and they're deeply felt. And I just wanted to say we see you and we're so glad that you're here today. That's why this conference and many other platforms that we offer here matters. Whether you're a professional or a family caregiver or both, we want you to leave today with some tools and renewed energy and know that there's a network out here to support you. I want to thank our team here at the Baltimore County Department on Aging, particularly our caregivers team. Kathleen, I know that many of you your cameras turned off, but I'd love to have you raise your hand or turn your camera on so that we can recognize you and the work that you do. Thank you. As many of you know, our department's mission is to strengthen lives by connecting people to services and resources that help them age well. That includes equipping caregivers like you with support and tools and information to make your work a little bit easier. Earlier this month, during Older Americans Month, we launched our 5-year strategic plan focused on preparing Baltimore County to be longevity ready, meaning that we are living longer, and that includes opportunities as well as challenges. And so our 5 key priority areas include affordable aging, caregiver support, healthy aging, communications, and volunteerism. You can find our full plan at our aging homepage on the Baltimore County website. And if my team members in the communication side could just put a link out there, that would be wonderful. You'll notice that in our strategic plan, caregiver support is the cornerstone of our work. The National Family Caregiver Support Program, we allocate about $3.3 million annually across Maryland to fund respite, supplies, medications, groceries, and referrals to long-term care services. And we're not stopping there. With more than 464 Marylanders expected to become caregivers in the next 2 years, we're investing even more. Our partnership with the Maryland Commission on Caregiving, housed in the Department of Human Services, will soon include dedicated staff and new strategies to connect caregivers with what they need quickly and effectively. This is a key priority of Longevity Ready Maryland and our strategic plan. Here in Baltimore County, we're developing our caregiver strategic plan to guide the work locally. Some of the highlights include coordinating across programs to reduce duplication, launching a volunteer visitation program for in-home respite, supporting young caregivers, expanding our kinship program, and adding a dementia navigator to assist with short-term case management. All of this reflects our commitment to supporting both current caregivers and those stepping into the role each and every day. We hope today's session give you actionable tools, whether it's learning about social whether it's learning about how to support one another or better strategies for self-care and connection. Thank you for being here and for all that you do. You're not alone in this work, and it's just so wonderful to see each and every one of you today.
Thank you, Director Tan. So it's now our pleasure to present Carolina Carbajal and Jessica Cheney from the Mental Health Association of Maryland, our first presenters today. Carolina is the Curriculum Development and Training Director and brings years of expertise to the Mental Health Association of Maryland, leading the creation of powerful, inclusive trainings for diverse communities, from mothers of color to parents of teens. She ensures the programs are high quality, meaningful, and accessible. Her warm personality and creative approach make learning both impactful and enjoyable. Jessica is the Older Adult Program Coordinator. She leads the Mental Health Association of Maryland's Older Adult Program with energy, compassion, and a deep understanding of mental health across the lifespan. She facilitates engaging workshops and connects older adults with free support groups and resources. Her positive spirit is contagious, making her a true asset to the team and a trusted voice for older adult wellness. Welcome, Carolina and Jessica. We'll let you get started.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Jessica, as introduced. It is a pleasure to present to you today. And my co-presenter, of course, is Carolina.
Let me start the video. I think that should work.
There we are.
Okay, here we are.
And we are going to present to you about how to take care of your mental health as a caregiver.
Okay. Jessica, can you share? Oh, perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, so perfect. So today we are just wanted to thank you for being here today. I know this is a very important topic, and it's so important to have these conversations, and so just it's an honor to be here today with Jessica and be able to talk about just ways to manage caregiver stress. It's like by providing efficient care, but also making sure that caregivers are taking very good care of themselves, because we know we can't pour from an empty cup, right? And so it's vital that we focus on prioritizing ourselves so that we can prioritize the people and the things that matter to us. And so we bring in this presentation from the Mental Health Association of Maryland, from our older adults program. And so we really, as like Jessica is the older adults program manager, and I know she does really hard work with really focusing on developing those tools and resources to caregivers, but also to older adults. And so within our older adult program, we also have our Engage With, which is our skills-based training program that's designed to, specifically for our older adults population. And so I want to, I guess we can, Jessica, we can go to slide 3. If that's okay, perfect. And so I just want to mention that that this presentation we will dive into 4 skills areas that are adapted from our Engage With program. And so there is what we call a 4-hour core skills training, but which is a prerequisite to take our supplement courses. And so we will be taking some of these skills that are taught and Engage With, and adapting it to our presentation today. So we can go to next slide there. And so we're gonna basically dive into these 4 core skill areas here. Again, adapted from our Engage with supplement module training, and so which is our partnering in care. And so we really want these skills to help us with practical strategies to enhance our caregiving approach while also maintaining our own well-being. And so we will be looking at some cognitive reframing. We know that if we're able to shift our own perspectives on challenging situations, we're able to find more constructive ways to respond. And so that brings us into what we call a person-centered care. And this approach really focuses on seeing our individuals, so our older adults, beyond their condition. So we really want to honor their preferences, their history, and their dignity. Skill 2, we will look into a little bit briefly into our core fundamental human needs, as it allows us to address our root causes of behaviors and emotions. So we would briefly look at little and explore a hierarchy of needs, so we can just discuss a little bit about how our basic needs must be met before we address those higher level needs, so we can create a foundation for well-being. And within that, after, we will look into how to engage like a team. So we believe that effective caregiving requires collaboration and shared responsibility rather than isolation. And that's why we're here today. So we want to understand what are those burnout, like what does burnout mean? What are those symptoms? How do you know that you're experiencing stress and burnout? So we'll identify those early warning signs of caregiver stress before they escalate to complete exhaustion. And so we want to be able to also support our caregivers with reducing partner stress and provide some valuable resources. But I think one of the most important parts of this presentation is developing a self-care plan, which is we want to be intentional with taking good care of ourselves, because it isn't self-care isn't selfish. It's essential for sustainable caregiving, and of course it prevents that compassion fatigue. So we can go on to caregiver stress. So caregiver stress is that physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion that occurs when the demands of providing care outweigh the resources available. So it's like, again, pouring from an empty cup. Eventually, there's nothing left to give. So this chronic stress response can manifest in various ways, from like sleep disturbances and irritability to serious health complications. And though it does not represent a personal failure, it can feel that way. So we rather want to understand that it's a natural response to an inherently challenging role that often goes unrecognized. So we feel sometimes that because we are stressed and overwhelmed, that we're just not capable, and obviously not true. So I always think of like that analogy of like carrying, like carrying a heavy backpack that just gets heavier each day with no opportunity, like just to set it down, and the same. So we have, this caregiver stress is also like a cumulative burden that develops when providing ongoing care to a loved one without the adequate support or respite. Our research does show that 40% of caregivers report high levels of emotional stress. And so making it not just a personal challenge, but it is a significant public health concern that deserves our attention and of course, action. So I'm going to go into, and again, Jessica, please, if there's anything that you want to add to that, you can add to that too, okay? So caregiver stress, we look at adult versus, our older adult symptoms. Those adults that are providing care, there's a consequence, or not, I don't want to say consequence, but more so like an impact to that. When we are caring for someone and then there's caregiver stress, it does it can impact our relationships, with our family, friends, with our loved ones. Financial stress, right? It can be financially draining, leading to stress and worry. That work-life imbalance. You will see in one of the in a later slide just the amount of hours that that caregiving takes versus on top of other responsibilities that one has. So there may be that work-life imbalance and that struggle to maintain those personal obligation and responsibilities. And then social isolations too. Sometimes that you may feel really alone. There may be, you may not feel like there's anyone that can relate or understand to that. With our older adults, we think of cognitive decline. Stress can impact our cognitive function, potential leading to memory loss and difficulty with attention. There's also increased risk of chronic diseases. So chronic stress can contribute. We know that there's a connection, the mind-body connection. And so when we are experiencing stress, it does impact our health in general. So there is a higher risk of heart disease, diabetes, and other health complications. And then there's the social isolation too. And elderly caregivers may become withdrawn and isolate themselves from friends and family. Okay, so going back to kind of our skills again, like our top 4 skills, I wanted to bring in this perspective of the skill of changing our perspective, or what we call cognitive reframing, which is not just a technique, but is really a mindset shift that allows us to see beyond immediate challenges and discover new possibilities, opportunities, and growth. So when we're working with our older adults, we often encounter situations that can feel frustrating or limiting. And so by reframing, like how we perceive these moments, we open these doorways to more productive, interactions and meaningful connections. So if we go on to our next slide, you will see what examples of what like cognitive reframing when it is when we focus on like shifting our perspective and really being able to communicate, let's say communicate, have relationships with our older adult population. And so I say words matter, like when you are, for example, I put these top kind of the terminology between like speaking versus communicating. When you speak to someone, versus when you communicate with someone. So like speaking is like that one directional, like delivering information or instructions, but communicating, however, is more of that reciprocal exchange. And so that way we create a voice, and creating this space for our older adults, to be able to, actively listen, to observe nonverbal cues, and again, creating a safe space for the interactions that we do have with our older adults. We also, we also think about, we make these assumptions about what our older adults want in the moment, which is important, but sometimes it can be, we call it an unrealistic, given their circumstances. So like if we, I would say by shifting towards establishing realistic goals together, we create this achievement that can provide a sense of purpose and accomplishment. So we really, it doesn't mean that we're dismissing our older adults' wants, but we're rather collaboratively determining what meaningful purpose looks like within the current capabilities, and celebrating these small victories along the way as well. And so when I think of limitations versus healthy boundaries, that's another I would say cognitive restructuring technique, is that viewing an older adult through the lens of their limitations creates this deficit and like this dependency. So, we really don't want to focus on the limitations, but rather like those healthy boundaries, having a clear understanding of what is possible, necessary, and respectful for all involved. So, we create this framework that respects everybody's needs. So, really healthy boundaries acknowledge that reality while preserving their dignity and focusing, whereas like that limitations really focuses on unnecessary restrictions and that diminished quality of life. So I would say, again, terminology matters. You see how, you, thinking of one way versus another way, how that could really impact that relationship and how, we collaborate and work with our older adults. So now we think of caregiving, versus partnering in care. So caregiving is just that, like we're giving care to someone. Partnering in care is different. It recognizes that the partnerships between a caregiver and the older adult. So it's like working as a team to effectively communicate. We want to create these shared goals and overcome any barriers that might get in the way. So, for example, it's like saying I get to help, versus I have to help. It's just a very different meaning. So I think that's a very just something to keep in mind when it comes to how we view our caregiving, let's say, approach and relationships with our older adults. And so one of the things that the Engage with Partnering in Care module does talk about is, again, think about, I want you all just to think about what partnership, what does it mean? Like, what does it mean to be a partner? And I want you just to think about, what are those values we associate with partnership? And just keep those in mind as we go, through these slides here, and how, again, these values that we associate with partnership. So just a thought there. Yeah, so you could put up the words there. So again, you can think about, you can look at, these are some examples, but there are also more. Some people will say like, yeah, like, partnership means like, being a partner means having a sense of humor, being forgiving, respectful, empathy. Empathy is such a big word too. So the next skill is the understanding our core needs. And so this skill too, I would say is foundational to effective caregiving, because it helps us recognize that all behavior serves a purpose. And so when we identify those underlying needs driving a person's actions or emotions, we can then address the root cause rather than responding to surface behaviors. So this skill is particularly important because any unmet needs often manifest, as challenging behaviors or distress. And so sometimes then our approach to caregiving then becomes very inefficient. Like we're not really taking care of those I guess, deeper, more in-depth needs rather than, and just keep it very surfacey. So by recognizing and addressing these foundational human requirements, we're able to prevent problems that then they arise and create an environment that is both, that if we're able to create, an environment where core needs are being met, then, we have thriving caregivers and also older adults. So we want to be mindful of, and we'll go on to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a very, very, very popular. We talk a lot about this in the field of psychology and counseling, but it's super, super important to understand that, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it is a valuable framework in understanding kind of like, that complete spectrum of human requirements. And so when we applied this to older adults, it helps us prioritize care in a way that honors the whole person. So, not just the most obvious needs, but the whole person. So we look at, I won't go into every single one of these, but you can see that the lower levels here, like the very basic physiological needs there, and the safety and security. So basically, the importance of this framework is that if we only address those like physiological and safety needs, then while neglecting those higher level needs, then we risk that creating that environment where our older adults can exist, but they don't truly thrive. And that's not what we want. We want to see our older adults thrive. And so, we support not just that survival, but a life of continued meaning, connection, and of course, dignity. And so understanding this hierarchy also helps us interpret, our behaviors. For example, for older adults, difficult behaviors often signals an unmet need. And so we want to be able to understand and address what those unmet needs are. And then, of course, help us approach the situation much more differently and effectively. We don't want those to go unaddressed. So that's the, I'm trying to think like of an example of, there was an example for, I think one of the examples that I could remember was a story around a daughter was taking care of her father, of her elderly father, and like he would just like wander, like at night, like wander around, and so she would do basically different things to kind of stop that behavior. But it was very, at the end, it was like very, he just needed to go to the bathroom. Like it was just like that type of that very low level need of just having to go to the bathroom. But she was intervening in a way where the wandering was a very, of course, safety is a concern, but it was some unmet need there that wasn't being addressed. So I'm just kind of thinking of an example there of why even thinking about this hierarchy of needs is important, so that we can really, again, dive into what the root cause of the issue is, and then we can intervene effectively. The same, like so family needs. I also think this is very important because our families are also, families, residents, partners also have needs. So safety are, for example, for those who are working, let's say in like a senior community, or are in, let's say, if an older adult is being taken care of by other individuals, let's say, there is families need to know that there is they need to feel reassured that their loved one is physically and emotionally safe, basically. So that needs to be addressed before families can focus on other aspects of care. So that's, it is the foundation of trust in any care relationship, that safety. That reliable information, access to clear, consistent, and trustworthy information. We need that we need to have that information about our loved ones. And then, of course, accurate communication. Families need honest, timely, and compassionate updates. And then I think one of those, communication can be really hard because it often can go, people can misunderstand or mistrust very quickly if communication is not clear. We also think about appropriate involvement. Like each family needs to find like their own, their right level of participation in the care process. And then also neither feeling excluded from important decisions nor overwhelmed by responsibilities beyond their capacity. And we want to be able to maximize goal-directed care. So families need to know that care efforts align with their loved ones' values and wishes. So it's a very taking that this person-centered approach ensures that these interventions and support strategies serve meaningful quality of life goals rather than just simply following protocols. And do we have do we answer the question? I think we have a question here.
Carolina, if you want, we can save questions at the end if you'd
Sure.
like, if you want to just
Okay,
scroll through and
that's fine.
yeah. Great, thanks.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to go into skill 3. So we want to engage like a team. I guess we can go on to the next slide there. So what does engaging like a partner mean? So engaging like a partner, again, it's that fundamental shift from is the care, it changes that fundamental shift of that care relationship from doing for to doing with our older adults. So this approach honors their autonomy and recognizes like meaningful care involved. That's more than just completing tasks, but you really want to create what we call a collaborative relationship. And so what does demonstrating respect mean? And that can look like asking permission before providing assistance rather than assuming that someone needs help. What about preserving ego? That also, we all need to feel capable and valued. So that means that our older adults, it's preserving ego means finding ways for older adults to maintain their sense of competence and worth. Notice how different it feels to say, let's work on this together versus let me do this for you because you can't anymore. We want to find ways to connect. So connection happens, when we see people, as a whole person, with their rich life history. So again, person-centered. We want to take time to understand people's interests, their past experience, what brings them joy, really, really come to, see them again, the whole person. And then we want to problem solve together. So that's, true partnerships means facing challenges as a team rather than imposing solutions. So we want to ask questions like, what do you think would work best? How have you handled similar situations in the past? This is all very, I just want to, easier said than done, of course. I think it's just kind of like, I always think of like planting seeds, just having these thoughts in mind too. And, I know everyone's, circumstances are different. Everyone's situation looks different, and it's not always, one thing may not always work for everybody else too. So let's talk a little bit about, I think, one of my favorite topics actually, burnout. So we all know that as caregivers, there's a high risk for stress and burnout. Just the fact that there's about 41.8 million Americans that provide unpaid elder care according to the CDC there. So when we talk about burnout, what is burnout? We can go on to I like this picture actually, because burnout. So burnout is that state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion that can happen when you dedicate time and energy to manage the health and safety, of someone else there. So caregivers who experience burnout may definitely feel tired, stress. There's an array of, I would say, of symptoms here, but these are the most common: withdrawn, anxious, depressed. Caregiver burnout can impact a person in various ways, and so different areas of oneself are impacted there. So it does have like that domino effect there. So what does it look like? So 60% of caregivers report symptoms of burnout. There's that, when we look at depression, anxiety, and for example, in irritability, it can manifest like as like sadness, anxiety, or heightened irritability. So that when we look at different like what does different like parts of emotional and mental symptoms, we're looking at like the loss of withdrawal, numbness, lack of empathy. There's also that guilt. Burnout can also bring about feelings of guilt, resentment, and anger towards the people that we're caring for, or even other family members. I see that a lot too, where there's a lot of resentment towards other family members, especially when you have like a sibling caring for a parent. It's like, well, there's like my other siblings don't care, they're not on top of things like I am, so it's a lot of that too that we also experience, and we get a lot of those stories too.
Caroline, I just want to chime in on this right here from
Yes.
also another perspective, because as you know, we're going through all the different challenges and changes that may happen when you are going through the caregiver burnout. But we also want to, heighten that, maybe establishing those healthy boundaries and communicating effectively can also help with the situation. But it's not ideal. Coming from personal experience, I am a sibling and I assist in caring for my younger brother that is disabled. And then my parents are older adults as well. And it's a challenge sometimes because it feels like it's never a break and we're always on the go. So you can feel overwhelmed. But the center point of what we want to definitely establish is that no matter what, you want to be able to definitely communicate your needs. Because a lot of times as caregivers, we overlook our needs so that we can definitely service the others that are needed. And we want to be able to definitely put our mental health in the forefront. So I don't want you to feel like, I got to take 10 minutes so I can have a break so I can eat something before something else happens if you are facing challenges. With my little brother, he can't sit still. So it is hard to leave him alone sometimes because of that challenge. But I have to maneuver things or even just have him sit with me so that we can eat lunch or snack and work through the best possible outcome. And if it feels like it's too much, then I lean on my support as well. So we don't want you to feel that, this is a never ending cycle. There's no solutions. There's no hamster wheel. We're trying to definitely establish the tools that you can use so that it can get better. And like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. I wish it did, but it doesn't happen overnight. But we're definitely hoping that these tools can help get there so that you can avoid having this burnout and you can take care of your mental health.
Thank you, Jessica. So we definitely, well, we talked about this part here, like what does it look like? Like, so I do encourage, and I think we kind of we dive a little bit into this in one of the next slides there, but I want you to think about like, what does it look like for you? Like how do you know when you are on the verge of burnout, when you are experiencing stress? And these are, I mean, we can go into, I mean, there's again a variety of symptoms, and we look at what is happening cognitively, what is happening physiologically, behaviorally, and so anxiety and fear, that comes up a lot, anger, frustration, denial, that guilt too, and so and kind of like the way that that Jessica explained that too, with just caring even for her younger sibling, like that, sometimes even that negativity. And then the loneliness, feeling very secluded or alone. You feel like there's no other support, even though let's say there may be. It's like you don't feel that way, and so that's why, again, important conversations to have, and to know that there are tools, there are resources as well, and that's what we really hope to be able to convey that. So again, and I think I brought this up before, but 20 hours per week, is the average time that people spend time caregiving on top of their other demands and responsibilities. That's a lot. I mean, there's so much happening in the world today, and then we think about all other responsibilities, people taking on, jobs, extra jobs, and then, having to meet the demands of life on top of caregiving. And so I really love, and this is just a picture of an iceberg here. Um, this is used in a lot of ways. I would say our iceberg is such a great depiction of like what we see versus what we don't see. So we see those surface level things there, but there's so many things happening underneath that we're not talking about, that we're not sharing, that we're just not expressing or communicating. And that I mean, you can fill that up with a lot of emotions, a lot of things that are not being expressed or talked about. We see that we think people are okay, but then it's like they're not. um so reducing partner care stress, care partner stress. I want you just to think again about what are those signs of stress in you, like um what activates stress for you. And again, this can all look different for every single one of us, and along the way that we perceive things, what we experience, any activating events that can basically trigger that response for you. So stress manifests so uniquely in each and every one of us. So I say that one of the best things to just be aware of is like how does your body respond to stress? Like how does it tell you that that is escalating for you? And then of course being able to create an action plan, or what we call like a self-care plan. So what are those physical signs of stress? Headaches, disturbed sleep patterns. Are you eating more? Are you eating less? What are those emotional indicators? Are you more irritable? Do you find yourself experiencing mood swings? Are you short-tempered? What about cognitive signs? Are you forgetting appointments? Are there any mistakes in medication management? Difficulty concentrating. So those are just one of the few or of many things that we um, experience, when there is stress. So I encourage you to please, um, be able to identify like how do I know that I'm stressed? And then we go into one of my favorite ones too, our self-care wheel. So I want you to, these are things that I typically encourage people just to think about, and to look at areas within your self-care. Like if you're looking at, psychological self-care versus spiritual self-care or financial self-care, like how are you taking care of yourselves within each of these areas here? And sometimes you may find, what, I'm doing really good in the physical realm of self-care, but I'm not doing so well in financial or emotional, right? And so it's being able to identify like where's it that I need to focus on a little bit more. Like do I have I I would say each and every one of these are important. They're very important, but sometimes there's certain areas that are neglected a little bit more, or it may not be the focus right now too. Um, so again, stress triggers. What activates that? Like what activates your stressors? And again, being able to identify, having that awareness of how my body responds to stress, how my mind responds to stress, and being able to take what we call an action plan. So the next slide here is just a little picture of what stress can feel like. I find it like, yep, that's an accurate depiction there too, of just feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Um, okay. And so that moves us on to this is another reflection here. Like I want you to think, as individuals who are caretaking, what works for you when it comes to coping and self-care? Like what do you do for you? And if you can't answer that, of course, I will encourage you to think about that and to come up with a plan. Because a lot of times all we get is there's no time. So asking for help and support is actually a strength and not a weakness. Okay, so remember that, please. It's okay. It's okay to ask for help. We're not in charge of, I always say this, we're not in charge of how other people respond to us. Remember that too. Like we're not in charge of that, but we are in charge of how we're navigating our own stressors, feelings, the way that we who we're turning to at the same time. Just because we're getting, let's say, resistance from certain individuals doesn't mean that other individuals are not willing to help. So please, I say it's a good thing to ask for support. You might want to join caregiver support groups also. I think even with the use, like there's a lot of technology apps and things like that that people are, I feel like more and more people are utilizing at the same time. I know it's not for everybody, and that's okay too. But know what's out there and see what works for you. And sometimes it's connecting ourselves, to, again, community resources. I say Mental Health Association of Maryland. If there's questions, if you're looking for any resources, I would say please do not hesitate to contact us. Another thing is setting boundaries, and just I think also learn to say no. There's just some things we can't do. We can't do it all. Yeah, I can go on and on about that piece, but let's go on to our self-care plan. So our last skill here is to think about our self-care plan. I know, again, easier said than done. We want to think about what is reasonable and realistic when we're thinking about ourselves, and also how much we can give. So let's say time is so valuable, it's so important, and I know we don't have enough hours in a day. So I would say it's about, like just, I would say, prioritizing certain things. Some things can wait. I sometimes I even say it to clients, some things can wait, even though we feel like it can't, it can. You're only one person. You're not 10 people at once to do it all. So I just kind of thinking about that timing, that effort. Caregiving requires, that physical, emotional, and mental effort. So also recognizing your capacity for effort. Some days you can, you're able to give more than other days, and that's okay. Understand boundaries, your knowledge there. Acknowledge the fact that that you don't have all the answers too. That you may need to seek some information or trainings, or again, other resources and supports. I let me see, I just want to be mindful of time here.
Yeah, we're down to, excuse me, Carolina, we're now to just a few more minutes. So
That's fine. Yes. I think that's fine. I just basically want all of you to just have this in mind. Like what is your self-care plan? What are you doing to to take care of yourself, to reduce stress? Stress will always be there, but what are you doing to help reduce that? Who are those sources? Who are the people that you can turn to? And the communities, your resources, local communities, local support groups that you can turn to. Who can I contact? Have these things written down, because sometimes in the moment it can feel, remember, feelings are not, they're not factual. So sometimes it can feel like we're alone in it and that there's nothing left to give, or there's nothing that I can do. But then I want you to have those like physical reminders that, you know what, hey, I can turn to this person, or I can call these people here that can help me, with some additional or just encouragement or empowerment. I don't know if there's anything, Jessica, I will let you go if there's anything that you wanted to add to that.
Well, just keep in mind that when you're creating a self-care plan, try to make sure that is ideal, realistic goals, and not the idealistic ones where we'll say, okay, you know what, I'm going to definitely get this taken care of when a certain time frame, and it may not happen. It may not happen. So as you're going through this and you're trying to make these healthy changes, be mindful of yourself, be patient with yourself, because a lot of times when we are out and about, I always ask this question nonstop, whenever I do teach about self-care, is how many of us literally say something nice to ourselves when we make a mistake or
Oh
when
yeah.
we have an error? Or when we forget something, how many times do you actually say something nice to yourself? And a lot of times the hands, they kind of go up, and then there's like none. And it's just, I want you to be mindful to have grace with yourself. Be patient, because just like you are patient with others, be patient with yourself. There are times that you may have goals and tasks that you need to take care of, and you probably may not get to them, and that is okay. All right. These are our resources here. So you can find a lot on the stress PDF, okay, and how to reduce it, what other self-care tips you can do as well. Mind My Feelings is also another way to express yourself, because a lot of times I also ask the question too, how many of us is able to effectively communicate how we feel 24/7? And I struggle with it. So I know there's other people that struggle with it. And with My Feelings, it helps you understand what they're going through. Okay. The self-care wheel, you can create your own one, or you can also use the one we have, or we can also share with Nicole and the presenters here so that you can have all of these resources available. Okay. The other things you can also use as well as resources is, of course,
Jessica, I'm sorry, folks were asking if you guys would be able to
Let me
share some of
see.
those resource links in the chat. We will share, just FYI for everyone, we will share resources with the slides and everything in the coming days after the conference. But yeah, oh, there we go. Carolina went ahead and put those resources in the chat. Thank you. And that
No
seems to be what most of the questions in the chat are about, or in reference to resources, not just for caregivers of older adults, but caregivers for disabled adults and children as well. So I think a lot of these resources are probably applicable for caregivers of all types and all ages.
yes.
Yeah.
So one of the other resources that we have that's available is actually our pretty much our peer support groups for caregivers, and it happens on Tuesdays. And it's called Talk to Me Tuesdays, and it's from 5:30 to 6:30. It is virtual. You can log in. You can call. You register on our website. You can go to mdaging.org or mhamd.org, and all you have to do is fill out the link and fill out the form to register, and it automatically sends you a link. And we have this every other week. And it's just a free resource for you to just come in, share your experiences, get other information from others, also get resources as well, but also just express however you're feeling. And it's for anyone who is ever a caregiver or just need that room just to express themselves. So we have that available as well. And then, of course, as we wrap up, we just want to remind you that you can't pour from an empty cup, okay? So remember to take care of yourself. What you are supposed to give others is supposed to be the overflow of you, okay? Not what's actually in your cup. So a lot of times as caregivers, we forget to refill our cup, refill what's in us. So take the time out and figure out, okay, maybe I like to do this. Maybe this will help reduce some stress. Maybe this will be better. But as long as you're filling your cup up so it can overflow, that is what is more important.
Thank you both so much. This is wonderful information. And there is, oh, perfect. There's contact info and everything as well. I think that had answered a lot of the questions. For the sake of time, we will move on to our next presenter, but most of the questions were in reference to resources, and there was another question about in-person support as well, which again, we will send some resources related to that after the conference in a follow-up email to everyone, as well as a recording of this conference. So thank you guys so much. That was wonderful information. We appreciate your time and all the information. So it's my pleasure to next introduce our next presenter, Jessica O'Hara Anderson. She's a community nutritionist with BCDA. She has a master's in the science of nutrition from MUIH. Her role as a nutrition educator is to provide her audience with understandable, simple, and cost-effective ways to cultivate a healthy lifestyle involving energy-rich food. Jessica specializes in chronic disease prevention and provides targeted food ideas to aid on the improvement of both physical and mental health, along with healthy aging and stress management. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. Do you guys have my deck, or do I need to share my screen?
If you're able to share, that's great. And if not, we can share for you, whatever's easier for you.
If you could share for me, that would be great.
Just give me 1 second.
Sure. So I'll just start off. Good morning, everybody. Like Nicole said, I'm Jessica O'Hara Anderson, and I am the community nutritionist with the Baltimore Department of Aging. And really, my goal as a nutritionist is disease prevention, chronic disease prevention. And as we all know, as caregivers, our immune system takes a big hit from all the stress that we are under. And in the goal of this presentation, I wanted to create some actionable ways that we can support ourselves in caregiving with food. So let's go on to the next slide. So what are we going to talk about today? Really, this presentation is, I consider it a nutritional toolkit, because I know as my role as a caregiver, I needed some tactical things to be able to work on when I was in those stressful situations. I also really wanted to talk about Baltimore County Department of Aging and Nutrition and what we can provide as a service. And we're going to talk about nutrition fundamentals. If you don't know what proper nutrition is, how can you be practicing it? We're going to talk about how stress can really impact us nutritionally. There are some ways that really affects us physiologically. Sorry, that's words and stuff. We're going to talk about ways that we can eat to balance stress. And then I'm going to provide you guys with a grocery list, because a lot of people say, well, what should I be buying? What should I, what should I go to the grocery store and buy? Some healthy snack ideas, and I know that when we are caregiving, we have a limited amount of time, so we want to provide our body with the most bang for its buck. So I gave you some suggestions there. Suggestions on meal prepping when you have a limited amount of time. And then just a really quick touch on mindful eating, because there are some ways that we can help our body not overeat and not overstress eat. And then just a couple of resources that maybe you don't know about that can help you. So Baltimore County Department of Aging, next slide. Our purpose is, our primary goal is to provide nutrition sites which provide a balanced nutrition meal in a social and supportive environment. And what happened is in the 1970s, a study was given that showed that when older people ate together, they had better digestion, they had less depression, and they had better cognitive skills. So it just found that community eating was really impactful. So that is the goal of Baltimore County. We provide what's called Eating Together program at sites, nutritional sites and senior centers around the area. And also those provide nutrition education and different community events that be held as well. And so to qualify for that, you need to be 60 years of age. and really, just be able to get yourself to one of the senior centers. So it can be a good option if you have an ailing relative that's over the age of 60 that needs a meal and is still available to move. All right. Some of the other areas that we provide are, again, the Eating Together, and then farmers market coupons. I don't know if everybody's aware of that, but Baltimore County every year has a farmers market coupon stipend. It comes actually in a credit card with $50 on it that you can go to various farmers markets around the city and buy $50 worth of fresh produce. So it's a really good deal. And then emergency supply meals, say it's snowing, the weather is bad, you can't get to the store, we do have emergency supply meals available. And then nutrition education, we do have an on-staff nutritionist that goes around as part of the Eating Together program and provides nutrition education around the county. So what is proper nutrition, right? Like a lot of people are, it's so broad, right? So nutrition is defined as eating a regularly balanced meal, which provides a person with energy. And really what we want, ideally, is food to consist of large amounts of vitamins and minerals. So macronutrients is a big word. And, what is it exactly? It means nutrients in large supply. And what are macronutrients? They are carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and water. And we need all 4 of those to provide nutritionally balanced meals. And then vitamins. What are vitamins? So vitamins are living organic things that they can provide certain areas in the body. They help cofactor several enzymes and hormones, and they really help with the immune system. And then minerals. Minerals are what provides structure in the body. Like calcium is a mineral, right? And we need calcium for bones. So calcium are inorganic structures that really, help keep our body functioning and, are really important as far as structure in the body. So those are 3 basic components when we are talking about proper nutrition. So here's a breakdown of the 3 main macronutrients that provide calorie density. So protein. So protein is made up from what's called amino acids, and there are 21 amino acids that the body needs. And what are amino acids? They're basically DNA. They help create our body, so it's very essential. And protein is the main fuel for muscles. And what do we need muscles for? We need muscles for movement. We also need muscles to help support our bones. So protein is very, you hear a lot of information on the internet, like eat a lot of protein, don't eat a lot of protein, but, eat enough protein that your body requires. And what are sources of protein? Chicken, turkey, fish. If you're trying to be plant-based, a variety of vegetables, nuts, beans, nut butters. So, we can get protein from lots of different ways. It doesn't need to actually be animal sources. And then carbohydrates. So carbohydrates is the body's main source of energy. Carbohydrates turns into glucose. Glucose quickly enters our system and helps, activate our cells. It's also the main source of fuel for our brain. So, a lot of information about not eating carbohydrates and, like how you should cut carbohydrates and blah, blah, blah for weight loss. Well, not necessarily. You need carbohydrates. You also need carbohydrates because carbohydrates have fiber. And we're going to talk about how important fiber is when we are in stressful situations. And then fats, fats get a bad rap, but there's different kinds of fats. There's trans fats, there's saturated fats, there's polysaturated fats, the list goes on and on. But really what we want to focus on is omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, which are in polysaturated and monosaturated fats. And what are those? Those are fish oils. Those are nuts. Those are also different kinds of fishes. Nuts, a variety of different kinds of, you can get certain amounts of saturated fat, ground beef. There is vitamins in there. So it's just, we need to have a balance of what kind of fats we're eating. And ideally, trans fat is the fat that we want to avoid. That is a man-made fat that is created to prolong the shelf life of packaged goods. So in prolonging the shelf life of packaged goods, it's probably not prolonging our shelf life. So just something to think about. And, you know, when you are looking at your nutrition label, you will see it says total fat, saturated fat, and trans fat. So it's, you know, the USDA does break it out for us. And ideally, we want the trans fat to be as low as possible and the saturated fat to be as low as possible also. Okay, so let's talk about how stress impacts our body, right? When we're caregiving, our body is under a lot of stress. And there are 4 ways that I wanted to point out nutritionally that stress can affect us. So it can raise our blood sugar. When we are in times of high stress, we have a hormone called cortisol that is produced from our adrenal glands, which sit on top of our kidneys. And what does this do? It raises our blood sugar. How does that make us feel? It makes us feel foggy and, you know, lightheaded and tired, right? And then our immune system, high stress modifies certain secretions of growth hormones called prolactin, which boosts our immune system. So basically when we're stressed, we're preventing prolactin from being produced. And then chronic stress decreases white blood cells, and we need white blood cells. White blood cells help aid in infection. So, you know, we really need to work on boosting our immune system when we're stressed. And then digestive issues. Stress affects the absorption and the process during digestion and intestinal permeability and the mucus that secretes our stomach acid. Like you hear a lot of GERD, IBS, IBD. A lot of these are created because of an imbalance of stomach acid. When we are under high stress, the stomach acid either gets overproduced or underproduced. And these were, you know, again, like these are diseases like you also hear about Crohn's or ulceritis that can come about from stressful situations. And then weight gain. So chronic stress elevates cortisol, again, that lovely little hormone that is created in our adrenal glands, which can cause cravings for particularly foods high in fat and high in sugar, right? You're stressed, you want to eat ice cream. You're stressed, you want to eat that fried food. But this can really, you know, aid in weight gain. And then, you know, chronic weight gain can, you know, really cause functional issues within the body. So those are some main issues that stress can cause us nutritionally. So what can we do, right? So I've given you all the great, now this is happening areas, but what can we do to prevent it? And you guys did get, I sent out a PDF of the nutritional toolkit, and you do have all of these in there, so you can reference them as well. So what are some main food groups that we can eat to help balance our stress? One of which is protein. So again, amino acids are the building blocks. Amino acids help control hormones and neurotransmitters that affect our central nervous system stress responses. So when we are feeling really stressed and overwhelmed, you know, protein can help bring our levels down in our nervous system along with bringing down our blood sugar. And that is what we want. And helps us, you know, elevate our moods and be able to really deal with stress more effectively. So what are some sources? Chicken, turkey, fish, a variety of beans, nuts, dairy products such as yogurt, and then also vegetables. And like a lot of people don't realize that vegetables can also be a source of protein. Broccoli, collard greens, spinach, kale, all of that can be really helpful. And then fiber. So fiber is essential for digestive health, but it also helps to control our blood sugar and our cholesterol. And studies found that implementing a higher percent of fiber in our diet can reduce cardiovascular disease and certain types of cancer. So, you know, what are forms of fiber? Beans, again, vegetables, fruits and grains. So, you know, these are things to think about when you are eating. How can you eat more effectively for your body? And then omega-3 fatty acids, those are those healthy fats that we were talking about. And basically these help to enrich immune cells, which help to reduce inflammation and basically help regulate our immune system to fight off disease. So what are those? Those are sources: salmon, tuna, flaxseed, pumpkin seeds, and tofu too, if you are trying to be more plant-based. Yep. And so then let's talk about specific minerals, right? So minerals create structure in the body, so they help us, to function. So we're going to cue on some couple of ones that we could use more of when we're in stressful situations. So magnesium. Magnesium is a cofactor of 300 enzymes in the system that regulate diverse biochemical reactions in the body. So when I say cofactor, what does that mean? That means they ignite them. They ignite the enzymes to start working and creating all kinds of systems in our body. This helps with nerve and muscle function, blood pressure, and then blood glucose control. And also magnesium is a great aid in sleeping and can be really helpful for anxiety. So what are some good sources of magnesium? Pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, spinach, black beans, peanut butter. So a variety of foods that you can be taking in to help increase your magnesium. And then zinc. Zinc participates in the greatest number of cofactors for the enzyme. So zinc helps basically all the enzymes in the body to do what they are going to do. It really is a regulatory role, and it creates structure and function for proteins. And it also aids in the release of insulin. What does insulin do? Insulin helps control our blood sugar. So we want insulin to be released. What are sources? The richest sources are shellfish, so oysters, and then beef, eggs, nuts, legumes, fortifying grains, toasted oat cereals, and soybeans. So a lot of the times, if you're buying a fortified cereal, it's going to have fortified zinc in it as well. And then some important vitamins to think about. So vitamin D, it plays an important role in our immune system. It also helps to activate the insulin secretion, once again, insulin to help control our blood sugar. And it reduces oxidized stress and inflammation in the body, which has been found to help aid in lowering depression and anxiety. But most importantly, vitamin D works with calcium to absorb calcium in the body. So if we're not getting adequate amount of vitamin D, we're probably not absorbing our calcium properly. So, sources of vitamin D: sunlight, going out in the sun can be a source of vitamin D. Swordfish, salmon, tuna fish, egg yolk specifically, not the egg white, and then shiitake mushrooms too, which is kind of a random fact, but I think it's because they grow out in the sunlight. And then vitamin C. We all hear about how important vitamin C is for our immune system, but it also, vitamin C helps stimulate our white blood cells. And this was what aids to fight our body's infection. So what are sources of vitamin C? Orange, when you were a kid, you always heard, drink your orange juice for your vitamin C. Grapefruit, strawberries, tomatoes, sweet red peppers. Red peppers probably have more vitamin C in it than oranges do, actually. Kiwi, broccoli, potatoes, and spinach. So if you, have an aversion to fruit, there are other ways that you can be getting your vitamin C. Okay, so these are foods to avoid. And of course, they are all the fun ones. And I, tell a lot of people, when they ask me, how do I not eat the bad stuff? I like to say it's a 90-10 rule. So if you want to try to eat as healthy as you can 90% of the time, and then 10% of the time you have that donut or that ice cream. But really, especially when we're stressed, we want to be providing our body proper amounts of fuel. And there are three main places that deter from that fuel and sort of just give us empty calories. So what are those? Those are fried foods. So faster fried foods, they also contain large amounts of trans fat, which also causes inflammation in the body. And when we're stressed, we're already, have inflammatory systems. When we have inflammation in the body, what does that lead to? Headaches, muscle aches, overall fatigue, and then, just uncomfortable feelings in the body because our body is inflamed. So, with trans fat, it's harder for the body to break it down. And that's what's causing, so much of the inflammation to occur. Sugar. So when we eat sugar, it increases our body's need to produce insulin, and this can create overall insulin resistance, which leads to type 2 diabetes. But sugar also increases that stress hormone, cortisol, to further your feelings of stress and anxiety. So when we are stressed, we eat sugar thinking, it's going to help. It's actually adding to our symptoms. So something to think about the next time that you're really stressed and you go for that candy bar. Maybe think about it instead. Maybe go for like some sliced turkey or some vegetables. Something, and I know that's very counterintuitive and it's like a lifestyle change that we have to make. But I'm just going to give you guys some of these options to think about. And then sodium. So sodium, right? We need sodium. It's a mineral. It works with potassium in our body to help regulate our fluid. The problem is that we've gotten to be such a sodium-rich society, and sodium is in so much of the processed foods that we eat. And high salt intake can amplify the body's stress response. It basically activates the pituitary gland, which again increases cortisol, that stress hormone. And then basically this can impair our mental health and impact our cognitive thinking. So, just things to think about when, we are eating high sodium foods. And one tip that I like to tell people is when you look at your nutrition label, you'll see on the side, it says percentages, right? If your item is 20% or higher of your daily intake, that's a lot of sodium, sugar, trans fat, etc. So something to think about. So a lot of my clients, when I work with people privately, say, okay, well, what should I buy at the grocery store? Like, you've given me a lot to think about, but what should I actually be taking with me? So I like to give people a good list of what you should be bringing. So I broke it down by proteins. You'll see it's chicken, salmon, tuna, yogurt, oysters. That's obviously like a treat you're going to get at a restaurant. Beans, all varieties. And, if you're buying canned beans, just be mindful that it says low sodium or no sodium on it. And then, hummus, chickpeas are another form of proteins. And then peas, green peas. A lot of people don't realize that green peas, those frozen variety, give us amount of protein. And then grains, brown rice, whole grain, wheat bread, quinoa, oatmeal, corn tortillas, those can all be considered good sources of grains. And fruits, apples, kiwis, blueberries. And again, all of these can be bought frozen if you are having issues with cost. I buy a lot of frozen vegetables. They have the same amount of nutrient value as, regular raw produce. So the only exception is when we get into canned fruits, it can get a little dicey because there can be a lot of added sugar in there. And with canned vegetables, obviously added sodium. So then, vegetables, you cannot eat enough vegetables. Spinach, kale, broccoli, carrots, red pepper, sweet chard, potato. I just really encourage people, find a vegetable that you like and just eat it, or try something else, bake it, do whatever you can to make that vegetable a little bit more tasty, add a little bit of spice on there. But it, you really are helping and enriching your body if you're adding more vegetables to your diet. And then, those healthy fats, those omega-3s and those omega-6s, avocado, walnuts, olive oil, salmon, flaxseed oil, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, and then olives too can be a form of healthy fats as well. So that's a grocery list to help you guys when you're going in the store, what exactly should you be buying? And then I made a list of some healthy snack ideas. So a lot of people, think that they have to sit down for those 3 meals a day. And, that is ideal, but you can break it down, especially if you are eating in a hurry. You can break it down to small 6 meals a day, but we want it to be those meals to be impactful, right? So, 6 meals a day, we want to acknowledge that the role of snacks in daily nutrition is very important. It helps maintain steady energy levels, and it can curb overeating, when you are going to maybe go eat a big meal. And then, just eating a little something enhances mood and cognitive function. A lot of the times people come to me and they say, I'm just tired and I don't feel well. I'm like, have you eaten today? And they'll be like, no. I'm like, okay, let's try that first because you would be surprised. So what are some snacking ideas? So, raw veggies and hummus, super easy. Hummus comes in the store. You can go variety of kinds, and you can cut up whatever vegetables you want and have them with them. It's a great snack. Yogurt, with fresh berries and maybe some raw nuts. Not only are you getting your protein, your calcium, but you are also getting with those raw nuts some healthy fats. And then, apple or a pear with nut butter. Apples and pears are a great source of fiber, and your nut butters are going to be your omega-3s and omega-6 fatty acids, which are great to help our immune system. And then corn tortilla. This is if you have a little bit of extra time, but a corn tortilla with beans and avocado, you just heat up that tortilla, pour some beans on there, cut up some avocado, and maybe put a little lime on there. And you have an amazing, meal that took you all of 5 minutes. So when it comes to, and I remember how hard it was, I was like, I don't have enough time to plan and build a proper meal, right? Because you are so limited on time. But, I found that if I broke my meal planning down to 3 simple steps, that made it a lot easier and it wasn't so overwhelming. So step 1, and I say this takes about an hour, is going to the grocery store. Plan for 1 week. I mean, now, honestly, you can be ordering things online and having them sent to your house as well. So it can be pretty efficient. And what I do is I try to meal prep as much as possible. I'm not a huge chef. I don't cook meals have like 12 ingredients in them. I keep it really basic: chicken, rice, vegetables. That's one of my main things, and I vary it. So, going to the store, you can break that down to 1 hour. Prepping, so you get in all your groceries, cut them up, store them, freeze them, use your vegetables, marinate your meat, put it in the fridge so it's ready. So you are all ready to go for the week. And then, cooking, if your recipes are all set up, keep your recipes simple. And then you have, it takes about 30 minutes to cook most stuff. And that way you have better meals on hand that you can be eating. I like to make a lot of meals. Like I make like 4 meals in 1 week, and then I have them. And it helps for me. It helped me a lot in relieving stress, knowing that I had meals prepared. And then let's talk a little bit about mindful eating, because you hear that term quite a lot. I just wanted to break it down as to exactly what it was. So, we have a widespread problem, not only with caregivers, but in society as well, as far as chronic stress disturbing our gastrointestinal function. And, really we want to look at ways to reduce that in how we eat. And we want to make eating more of a softer, I'll say that, softer function instead of, a stressful function. And we want to promote our parasympathetic nervous system, which means, that's the part of our nervous system that calms us down. So how do we do that? So before we eat, pausing to breathe. Take a deep breaths to begin with and check in with your hunger. I like to tell a lot of people, nobody can tell you if you're hungry or full except for you, right? So, ask yourself these questions, before you maybe are going to have that McDonald's hamburger or, that a mound of ice cream that you think that you need. Are you feeling sensational physical hunger? How hungry are you? Are you maybe just thirsty? A lot of the times we're just not drinking enough water. And then really think about what are you hungry for? And, why are you craving that ice cream and why? And listen to what your body is telling you, because nobody can tell you what to eat and what not to eat. So then also so that's before you are about to eat. So while you are eating, eating slower, thoroughly chewing food aids in breaking down food to be more absorbable. And then it makes the mechanical and enzymic actions of the food come alive a little bit more. And then also simultaneously, when you're chewing, your food is your body is identifying the food, and you're actually getting to taste it and enjoy more. We do a lot of like shoveling of food. Let's try really hard to just eat and chew, because you are missing out on some very important enzymes being activated if you're not chewing properly. And you're also making it harder on your digestive system when we're not chewing as much, because what happens is it gets down to the stomach, and the stomach has to work even harder to digest, where it could have had like a little bit of a starting point when you were chewing. And then, some ways that we can help with, trying to calm our stress levels down is meditation. Shifting there's been lots of studies about how it shifts our nervous system towards parasympathetic dominance. And really, we want to support rest and digest. I like to tell people, if you can, after you eat, pause for 5 minutes and let your body digest. Because what happens is we start eating and we have this, little function in our brain called dopamine that says, ooh, that tastes good, eat more of it. And our body's like, hold on, I need a second to digest it. So I tell people, even if you count to 5 or 10 or 15, just give yourself a minute. And then, you can do that by there's some great meditations that you can do through apps and online YouTube. You can listen to a guided meditation and engage in breath work before meals. Free videos are available online. And one app that I think is really good is called Inside Timer, that gives you a variation of different meditations that you can try. So then just a couple of resources that I wanted to point out. Baltimore County Department MAPS. So that is a program that MAPS helps facilitate any issue you might have. You can go and log on there, and also you can call them and tell them, I'm having an issue with etc. And they can send you on the right point. And that is also available in the Maryland Access Point as well. And then, the Older Americans Act nutrition home delivered meals, that can be done in eldercareacl.go. And that's, there are lots of Meals on Wheels and different ways that you can, have food delivery if you are in need of that. And then SNAP, that is Supplemental Nutrition Assistant Program, which is federally funded, which you can apply for, which provides food coupons in the form of credit cards. So when you go to the store, you can have assistance with that as well. All right, and that's all. So I can open it up for questions or whatever you guys need. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'll start again. Thank you, Jessica, very
Sure.
much. There are 3 questions so far in the chat. First question, should you use supplemental minerals daily?
So I encourage people, the best way to know what you are lacking in is to go get blood work. Go get blood work and see if you actually are in need of those supplementations, especially when it comes to iron and calcium. We can sometimes be over supplementing. So yes, supplemental is a great tool if you feel like you're not getting it from food itself, but we need to know exactly what we are lacking. So simple blood tests, you can get that through your primary care physician, calcium, iron, zinc, et cetera, et cetera.
Great, thank you. Is it true that grapefruit may be a problem with certain medications?
Yes, yes. So grapefruit, that is a good point out. Basically, it counteracts with certain medications and makes them so they're not absorbable. So if you are taking the medication, specific medications, I know a lot of statins and a lot of blood pressure medications like high cholesterol and blood pressure medications are affected by grapefruit. So just keep that in mind. I always ask my physician if I'm going to get a new prescription, what is this interaction? Also, now we have Google that you can always, type in and see. But yes, something to keep in mind when you are taking meds is that grapefruit can prevent the absorption of that medication and basically make it ineffective in some instances.
Great, thank you. Next question, can you post those meal delivery?
Oh, the resources? Sure. So when they send out the PowerPoint, you will have that resource list as well. But I know if you Google Meals on Wheels or anything of that nature, they should be able to get you to a link to sign up for that.
Great, thank you. Very helpful. Let's see, any other questions for Jessica? Okay. Well, if not, like we said, we will be sending you resources and information. And if you have any questions following that, please feel free to reach out to us with the Caregiver program. And we can always touch base with Jessica to answer those questions as well.
Of course.
Great.
All right.
So thank you so very much. It was extremely helpful, informative, lots to walk away with and explore in our grocery store and make sure that our diets are filled with wonderful, healthy foods. So thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Next up, Nicole will be presenting an overview of the Caregiver Support Program's latest resource, TrueAlta. TrueAlta is an educational and supportive website just for caregivers. Let me know when you're ready, Nicole.
Thank you, Kathleen. Let me just get my slides up. Okay. So as Kathleen mentioned, we're excited to be able to offer free access to TrueAlta now for caregivers in Baltimore County. So TrueAlta is an online learning and support program that offers educational resources in lots of different formats, as well as support for caregivers in the form of virtual support groups, community chat spaces, and one-on-one care coaches. TrueAlta doesn't require any apps to be downloaded, and it can be accessed on your web browser and viewed on things like smartphones, tablets, or computers. And so, when we talk about the support groups that TrueAlta offers, they are available at various times throughout the day on various days throughout the week as well. And they're centered around lots of different topics, such as caregivers who support parents, caregivers who support spouses, or those with dementia. They're available in both camera on and camera off styles. So if you wish to remain anonymous and don't want to be on camera, you can join a camera off style support group and just participate in the chat. They are available in English and now in Spanish as well, and they are led by professionals in the field. And so when we talk about different learning opportunities available on TrueAlta, that comes in the form of lots of different educational pieces, including articles, interactive scenarios, and webinars. And the webinars are available both in a live format and recorded. The topics of all the different learning topics are based on your individual needs. So when you initially sign up, you're able to pick and choose topics that are relevant to you, and then TrueAlta will tailor everything specifically to the topics that are important to you. And everything on there is written by professionals in the field as well. Nurses, occupational therapists, lots of different professionals that are contributing their expertise to these different pieces of educational materials. And so for folks that are interested in registering for TrueAlta, For individuals in Baltimore County, they can contact us. Registration is done through us. We are able to provide free access, and individuals would just need to reach out to us or access the request form that's on there. And I will put this slide back up, but I wanted to do, since we have a couple minutes, I wanted to go ahead and pull TrueAlta up on my screen and share that for you guys so that you can see what it's actually like in there, and how easy it is to use. So just give me 1 second here. Let's see. Okay. So now if anybody can't see this, just give me a heads up. Okay, so I am now in TrueAlta. So this is what it would look like if you were to log in, if you had an account and you logged in. So when you initially go in, there is an area, like I talked about, where you can kind of pick and choose the topics that are important to you. So when you initially create an account, it would ask you what different topics you would like to learn more about. So as you can see here, there are a variety of different diagnoses that you can choose from, such as Parkinson's, dementia, kidney disease, lots of different things. Behaviors. So if you're caring for somebody who is experiencing specific behaviors that are challenging for you to handle, there is as you can see, a plethora of different things that you can kind of pick and choose from to sort of help you learn how to handle some of these behaviors and learn a little bit more. And the lists go on and on, all these different topics that you can kind of pick and choose from in order to really create a program that is tailored to your needs. So then if we go into this learning section here, you'll see here, there's lots of different categories. So this is based on the topics that I chose when I set up my profile. So sometimes they will group them into different toolkits, as you can see here. So this one's about communication changes, caregiver wellness, so focusing more on taking care of yourself, behavior changes, lots of different things. So if I were to go into, let's say, the Dementia Essentials toolkit, once I'm in there, you can see there's different articles, there's videos, there's these companion cards, which you could bring with you. You could print them out, bring them with you. And they just let people know if you're out, let's say you were at a restaurant, you could hand this to the waiter and say, you know, hey, the person I'm with has dementia. So, you know, just be patient with us and forgiving of anything that might seem a little bit off here or anything. So yeah, so in these different toolkits, you can see some of them are videos and they tell you approximately how long they are. If it's an article, about how long it would take you to read that. If you said, ooh, I want to read that, but I don't have time to read it right now, you can save it and that'll save it to your saved activities. So there's a ton of stuff in learning. We could spend all day just going in that, but let me quickly go over to events. So this is the events section. So most of these events that you'll see on here are specific to TrueAlta. We also upload our events. So if you were a member on TrueAlta, you would be able to actively see any events that we have coming up as well. For example, today's conference is right there. And then as I scroll down, I can see all these different virtual events that are happening. So some of them, like I said, are cameras off. So this one here is an anonymous talk about mental health. So cameras would be off and it would just be available in chat, and you can contribute in the chat, or you can just sit back and listen and absorb the material that way. There's different support groups. So here's another anonymous support group about survival. Here's just a little relax and recharge. So this is just a little 30-minute meditation that you could participate in. Lots of different support groups, like I said. So then if I go back up here to this top bar, we'll look at the forum. And here is where you can see there is a community chat space. So as I scroll through here, we can see there's lots of different opportunities to share, maybe ask questions, and almost like a Facebook format if you're familiar with that. And then there's specific groups within the chats as well if you want to specifically talk to others who are caring for somebody with dementia, for example. And then the last section I want to show you, here is the support section. So if you were on here and you were ever in doubt, you could always come here. You would see our contact info, our website, all that. And then additionally, which is pretty cool, I think, is you have a personalized care coach. So while TruAlta is a nationwide company, they are a small support team. So it's really nice that you get one-on-one support from one of the care coaches. You're assigned one of, I think it's 4 care coaches, and they provide one-on-one support for you. So you can book a call with them. You can just email them. And then they will do a video chat with you, or they will email with you. They'll do a phone call, whatever form you find most supportive. And sometimes it's just an opportunity to just vent one-on-one with somebody who understands. Like I said, these are all professionals and they're all caregivers themselves, so they all understand. So I think this is a really kind of unique and special opportunity on TruAlta as well. So, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this for a minute. And I'm going to just share one more time. I just want to pull up my slides if I'm able to. Oop, it's gonna give me that. Just so you guys can see one more time. Actually, you know what? I'll just throw it in the chat. I'm gonna put that, if you're interested, that registration form, so that if anybody is interested, they can access that. Does anybody have any specific questions about TruAlta while I get that pulled up and before our next presenter starts? I'm going to take that as a no. All right, I'm going to put that in the chat then. All right, so that's a link to, if you're interested in registering for TruAlta, you can click on that link. It'll ask you just a couple of basic questions, and what that does is it prompts an email to be sent to our team, in which case we will then follow up with you and get you set up and just collect a little bit of basic demographic information and get you set up on TruAlta.
Hey, thank you so much, Nicole. So we're a few minutes early. Emily, are you prepared to start a little earlier, or I'll introduce you?
We'd love a few extra minutes, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I would like to present our next and final presenter of the day, Emily Kearns, with her special guest, Mary Todd. Emily is the coordinator for our community-based initiative, Dementia Friendly Baltimore County, led by the Baltimore County Department of Aging in collaboration with the Caregiver Support Program. Emily's personal care partnering with her parents, who both lived with dementia, was life-changing, catapulting her into what is now her first love, supporting those living with dementia. Emily is committed to change-making, including innovative programming and community education, so that individuals living with dementia may continue to live well, experiencing joy and meaningful engagement in their communities that support and celebrate them and the life they choose. Emily was formerly a co-lead and project manager at Dementia Friendly Massachusetts and a consultant with the Massachusetts Lifespan Respite Coalition, evaluating innovative respite programs and hosting a TV show called Caring for Others, Caring for Ourselves. Welcome, Emily. We're very happy to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Kathleen. It's my honor to be here today and to be co-presenting with Mary Todd, and I will introduce Mary in fuller form a little bit later. But let me start by sharing our PowerPoint, which will guide us through the flow or the agenda for today, and we will launch right in. Okay, there we go. Can you see my screen? Yes, great. Thanks, Mary. Good. So our session, and again, I'm honored to be here and delighted to share this space with Mary Todd, is about finding joy in caregiving. And what we're going to cover is, first of all, what does it mean to be joyful while on the dementia journey? And we're going to do a little bit of a crosswalk between how we ordinarily think about joy and really infusing the concept of meaning and finding a sense of purpose in this journey. So the first half of first 20 minutes, we'll be talking about that, and I'll also be drawing on some resources that I hope will be helpful for you. And then the second half will really be focused on the lived experience that Mary Todd will share. So we'll be having a conversation, kind of, I'll be asking her some questions, and she'll be sharing about her journey with her husband, Jim, and we'll say more about that when I do a fuller introduction. Please save your questions and comments for the end. Take a note, jot them down, and we'll have a good 10 or 15 minutes at the end for discussion with you. We will also be sharing resources and our contact information at the end. So how's that sound? Good. So here we are. And again, thank you, Kathleen, for that introduction. Mary Todd is a friend, a colleague, an author of a new book, which we'll say more about later, called You Make a Big Good, A Journey with Alzheimer's. She's a former care partner with her husband, Jim. And again, we'll do a fuller introduction. Trying to click the PowerPoint. So a little bit first about what we do at Baltimore County Department of Aging Dementia Friendly Initiative. In case you're interested in joining us later, we do community education. If you get a copy of this PowerPoint, you'll have the recording. You can see our contact information there. We do community education sessions about the signs and symptoms of dementia, communication tips, and resources. We're always looking for folks to join our leadership team. So if you're interested in learning more about this initiative and how you can participate, please reach out to us. My information is there now, 410-887-4751. You can call, but that will also be in the presentation at the end. So let's talk a little bit about joy and meaning, because I don't think most of us consider dementia and walking the dementia journey for ourselves or as a care partner with others as something we would be joyful about. So let's make space for that. So when we talk about joy in terms of the dictionary, what are some of the definitions that come up? Gaiety is a synonym. The expression of emotion, of bliss, happiness. I love this one, a source or cause of delight. And again, in the dominant culture and the stereotype of someone living with dementia, we don't see joy as part of that. But if we start thinking about joy as finding meaning in our challenges, in our day-to-day life, and finding purpose in supporting others, then we start to fill out this concept, this definition of joy a little bit more. So according to the dictionary, what does it mean for something to be meaningful? It means to have a sense of purpose. It means to have something, engage in something that's significant. And I want us to take note of that because, again, in my introduction, Kathleen gave, or my bio, you heard that I lived and tried to support my folks for a long time, more than a decade, they lived with dementia, and it was significant. It was meaningful in terms of the dictionary's definition of it. It was very impactful. And so when we start to bring together meaning, purpose, and joy, now we have a conversation, right? Now we can understand how being a care partner can be joyful if we start thinking about meaning and purpose as part of that definition. So what does it mean? What does it look like to bring purpose, to bring meaning and actual joy into the care partnering, into the dementia journey? What I've drawn on are some really wonderful resources. And again, these are listed at the end, so you'll see, where you can find them. But perhaps you've heard of the Dr. Patch Adams. He wrote a book called Gesundheit. He was a doctor who actually became a clown, received clown training, and would go into hospital settings. Now, I use that as a way to launch our conversation because surely a hospital is a place where folks are suffering, right? There's a lot of pain. Some folks are there so they can be treated, cured, their conditions can be managed, and some folks are there with living with diseases and situations and conditions that are not curable, for which there is no magic wand, there is no pill, right? And yet he showed up and he brought in his clowning joy, and I would also say meaning and purpose to the individual living, the journey with the disease, with the condition, but also the care team. So I will be talking, a little bit about his work. Another piece is a book called Living in the Moment, a guide to overcoming challenges and finding moments of joy, in Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, by Elizabeth Landsverk, who's a doctor, MD, with Helen Miller. So what does joy look like from these sources? Oh, also another source, I forgot, is AARP has a wonderful article called How Do You Bring Joy to Someone Living with Dementia? So I've drawn on those resources to give a context for what Mary will be sharing as well. So we have this definition of joy that we're expanding to what is meaningful, what is purposeful. But these folks are also talking about, what it looks like in the care partnering and also what it looks like in our own individual journey with dementia. So it's not just the care partner, the caregiver, it's of course, the whole care team. And that's really what Mary's going to be focusing on, she and Jim together. And I love what you talked about, Mary, what you talked about in your book is, you're co-authoring this really with Jim. It's his experience. So when we talk about joy and meaning making, we're not just talking about the care partner. We're talking about the relationship and all individuals involved. So some of the practices for finding joy, I just think are wonderful. Oh, one more resource I forgot to mention is a great book called Dancing with Elephants by Jerem Sawatsky. And it's a spiritual guide, but it's also very, very practical. And when we talk about, bringing joy in terms of how to do this, and Mary is the expert on this, this book offers several things, including bringing puppies, bringing dogs into the picture, playing with children. Some of the other resources talk about cooking together, listening to music. And there's some programs, including music and memory, that's actually evidence-based, which means there's research behind the effectiveness of the program. Music, there's a lot of research behind listening to music together, to favorite playlists and moving to the music. Gardening, there's actually now research about, hands in the soil, and that actually has brain health implications. Looking at family photos, gentle exercise. So these resources, some of them actually nod to the others. There's a crosswalk, they offer the same kind of suggestions. The arts have become really important in terms of the world of joy and meaning making and purposeful engagement. Some of the museums have dementia specific times where folks living with dementia and care partners can go and enjoy pieces of art, enjoy the museum in quieter times. And what I love about this is, in terms of finding joy in the art, they're not visits that would emphasize the details, the history of the art necessarily. What they're emphasizing and making space for is how the art makes us feel. So joy and meaning making and purpose really land in the feeling realm. And as we know, folks living with dementia, although not one size fits all, right? There's so many different dementia diseases under the umbrella of dementia. And also, we're so unique in terms of our personalities, so the disease manifests uniquely. How dementia shows up is quite specific to the individual, and how they feel about something is quite specific. So what's important in terms of communicating and creating joy is knowing the other person's interests. It may not be art, it may not be music, it may be nature, but to really sit in the realm of the feeling. The executive functions almost across all of the diseases become compromised. And so we don't want to be visiting and talking about details and planning and what did you have for breakfast, what do you want to do in the afternoon. Instead, how are you feeling today? And giving space to that. And this is how I'm feeling, really the realm of the heart. And when Mary speaks, we're going to see so much of that heart work in terms of the meaning making, the purposefulness, and the joy. So this is just, those were just a few offerings, but really I want to make space for Mary. And let me tell you a little bit more about Mary. So Mary is, as I said, a colleague and a friend. Mary is 88 and lives in assisted living in a senior residence just north of Boston, Massachusetts. She's worked in the community college system and loved her work there. She retired in 2001. She and her husband, Jim, traveled and were active in a local peace organization during the next several years and welcomed many families from Iraq as they settled in the US. She found that work very meaningful. Jim was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, MCI, in 2011, and that began the trajectory of trying to understand and deal with their life with dementia. Jim entered memory care in 2019 and was there for 2.5 years before his death in 2022. Mary's written a magnificent book about their dementia journey called You Make a Big Good, A Journey with Alzheimer's. She's also written poetry, and she'll speak about it, particularly haiku. She was recently a guest on the program Alzheimer's Speaks, interviewed by Lori LeBay. And that program segment is called An Honest Look at a Couple's Journey with Dementia. It's really remarkable. I highly recommend it. And you can find that on YouTube. Today, Mary joins us to share the joy and meaning she has found and created during their dementia life together. And so what we will do now is we will use Mary's photos to guide the conversation. We talked about some of the joy-filled practices. Before we get into Mary, here we go. Let me move. Can you see this? The pictures of Jim and his family? Can you see the slide okay? Great. So Mary, the slides will guide us. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found joy, how you found meaning making and purpose through your journey with Jim and your family?
Well, it was really interesting. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you about this. And it was, for me, a useful process, I guess, of looking at where there is meaning and joy. So many times we get so caught up in being so exhausted, you don't think about those kinds of things. So this was really helpful for me to take a look at this. The first picture with Jim is his love of ice cream. I could have a really bad day and go out in the hallway as I'm leaving Jim's room and bump into an aide and say, can you look in on Jim? And so she walks right in and says, hi, Jim, you want some ice cream? And it was like, sure. And I was just so relieved that all of a sudden he was not the stubborn and difficult person that he had been. So ice cream was really important. And we passed this ice cream place every time we went to a doctor's appointment. And he didn't mention it on the way there. But as soon as we got in the car and we had finished our doctor's appointment, it was ice cream. He knew what was coming up. So a lot of food related things. The next picture is a picture of my son, Jeff. Every Christmas and his birthday, which was around Christmas, Jim loved eggnog. And so Jeff would bring him eggnog every year, and he would just, I don't know, revel in that eggnog. Every, excuse me, every swallow was, ooh, Swedish. It was really, really sweet. And then the last picture, Jim loved to dress up. And so this was a real advantage to being in a senior residence that had independent, assisted, and memory care. And memory care, they did such fun things. So here's Jim in his long hair, his witch hair, I guess. And when he looked at that picture, he said, he needs a haircut. So that fun part of him was always there. Loved to dance, and so like Cinco de Mayo and the sombrero hats. Just there were so many things that the memory care place itself did for Jim. Oh, calling bingo. When Jim went to memory care, he had such a hard time adjusting. And so I asked the staff, is there anything that you can think of that Jim could do that might make him feel important or involved or whatever? And calling bingo was one of them. He loved to call bingo. And an aide would come in to his room and say, Jim, I need you. Can you come help me? And man, he loved her. He would follow her anywhere. So it was, so the staff member would call like 072, and then Jim would repeat the words. And so that was all he had to do. Got so after a while that he had difficulty holding on to the words in order to repeat them, and that was painful. But he did for most of the time that he was in memory care call bingo. And then here's our dog and Jim and our son Steve. Looks like it might have been during COVID time because it looks like Steve has his mask on. But they had these drums that were made someplace in Central America that one of our kids had picked up and brought back for Jim. And he loved to keep time to the music. So we listened to a lot of music on my phone mostly. So that was always fun. So this last one is just too sweet. I have a chapter in my book called Sweet Moments, Tender Moments, Sacred Moments. And this is a sweet moment. Jim loved talking to the man across the street who was himself in the mirror. And so I asked him one time, Jim, would you like to talk to that guy? And he said, okay, sure. So he goes down and it was just such a beautiful conversation. It was like, hi, I'm so glad to see you. You are always here. every time I come, you come out to see me. It's so nice to have a friend like you. And then sometimes he wouldn't recognize himself, but most of the time he enjoyed seeing that man across the street or down the hall or whatever. Oh my goodness, this is an interesting one. This was something that was intended to be joyful and ended up being a little bit different than that. So the Alzheimer's Association was having a special program to paint ceramic stuff that they had already fired. And I thought, oh, it was probably more interesting to me than I thought for Jim. But anyway, I said, oh, that'll be fun. I'll sign up for that. And when I told Jim about it, he said, I'm not going. And I said, oh, we're all signed up. Let's just go. We'll see what it's like. And he said, I don't want to go. So anyway, somehow we managed to get in the car, and on the way, so this was in southern New Hampshire. It was about 10 miles, I guess, from where we were living. He decided he was going to get out of the car. He opened the door, or tried to open the front door. And I am such a blind spot after that. I have no idea whether I pulled off the road. I got to the place, but even once we got there, he said, I'm not going in. And eventually he did. And one of the Alzheimer's staff that was used to different kinds of behaviors eventually painted this smiley face, which was, I thought, something easy to do. And then we put candy in it in his room. He loved spearmint leaves. And so, yeah, it ended up being okay. And when we got back to the car, it's like, that's the way we traveled from then on. Jim in the back seat with the child lock on, so he couldn't get out. Scary, scary.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So we have this first one here is that I have the same chapter that's called Sweet Moments, Tender Moments, Sacred Moments. This was, let's see, this must have been our anniversary. And any special event, I always thought, is this going to be our last one? Is this going to be our last one? Last Christmas, last anniversary, last birthday. And he said, we talked about our anniversary, most of which he didn't remember. And I had asked my daughter if she would make some anointing oil for me. And so this is what I'm doing in the thing. This was our anniversary, and I put some oil on my fingers, and I asked him if it was okay if I put some oil on his forehead, and he said fine. So he's sitting in his recliner chair, and I'm standing in front of him. And I did kind of like the Buddhist thing, I guess, put some oil on and put my fingers on his forehead and said, Jim, may we be safe. And then do it again. Jim, may we know that we are loved. And he said, I have something to add. And it was like, we have lots of hopes and feelings. Amen. And Jim had been a minister as well as a DJ. And so his amen part just tickled me. But by that time, I was crying. And he said, just one more thing. May it stay that way for a long time. And that was really a sacred moment. One of the books that I have is Creating Moments of Joy. And so I think there were some things that we did that were in that book. And so I did write a lot of haiku, lots of which is sprinkled throughout my book, but this is one that was, this is what I want. So it's 575. This is what I want. To create moments of joy for my beloved. So we had a lot of moments of joy that it was really helpful for me to go back and just relive those moments. And then the holding hands, holding hands was so important to me. It was a way that I kept connection with Jim. And that was just really important. And another haiku, I will hold your hand so when I can no longer, memories will warm. And then the last one is Jim in his kind of like his pastoral role in memory care. We had a service every Sunday, and it followed a kind of a Catholic model. And when it was time for a passing of the peace, Jim had been standing outside the meeting room and looking through a large opening. But he'd come when it was time for passing of the peace. He came in and he ran around to every single person and got close to them. And if they were looking at him, he would look at them and he would say, peace be with you. And he took his time. He was oblivious to how much time it would take until he went around the whole room. It was just very, very sweet, very special, and very Jim. Yeah, that was great.
Thank you. Here's some more, Mary.
Oh, all right. Well, this is another idea that I got from Creating Moments of Joy book.
Yes.
This is a word cloud that I didn't even know that term existed, but I have a niece that is a high school teacher, and she says, oh, I use it with my students all the time. So on Facebook, I asked people, when they think of Jim Todd, what one word do they think of? And I got so many responses. It was really gratifying. So you can't really see in this slide that much, but the word kind is quite large. So the more times you put a word in, the larger the word gets. And he was the manager of a conference center here in North Andover. And so when they think of Jim, they think of Rolling Ridge. So all of those words. And so Jim, he couldn't read any longer, but he knew that there was interesting things up there. So he would point and I would say, oh, Jim, that says, when they think about you, they think you are so kind. And he would respond. He really loved looking at that. And then one time he said, I wasn't thinking of myself so good. So it was a way to remind him that, yeah, he was so good. And then cleaning the whiteboard, the two things that the staff in memory care came up with to make Jim feel useful. One was cleaning the whiteboard every morning. So after breakfast, when he was finished eating, the activity room was right next to the dining hall. So he would go right in and he'd get that thing so clean. And he just, for such a simple thing, it made him feel so important. So that and calling bingo, those were the two things that the staff in memory care came up to help Jim do whatever. So this was after his birthday, that December 20th. Okay, I see those flowers coming up. Those are my way of finding joy. And I needed them. When Jim went into memory care, I was so needy. And in one of the other sessions, they were talking about being exhausted. So exhausted. my kids said, Mom, we are as concerned about you as we are about Dad. So finding ways to taking pictures with my iPhone, I just love doing. I think this one on the left was at a local horticultural park. And I don't know, it was just, I love taking the pictures. And when I would be doing that, I would be in my zone of, I guess, meaning making and not worrying about Jim, which was quite nice, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Oh, and here's more of my picture taking. I learned how to take a picture without touching the camera. And so when I could see these birds were right outside my window. I was on the level that walked right out into the probably the back walkway. And I was lucky enough one day to capture both the Baltimore Oriole and the rose-breasted grosbeak. And you can see, I don't know if you can see in the, excuse me, in the orange that I have out there, that is completely empty. That Baltimore Oriole just ate every bit of it. But I got such pleasure, such joy of being able to take those pictures and actually have them come out okay. And then to take the picture without touching the camera for the hummingbird, be able to catch it without having it all blurry. And it just brought me a lot of joy. And the last one is a friend took me to a nature preserve where the birds ate out of your hand. And it was magical. Put your hand out there and they would just come and would nuthatch and chickadees and several different kinds. And of course, all kinds of birds in the woods as well. But nature was very healing, brought me a lot of meaning and joy. It was fun.
And thank you. Mary, speak a little bit about your writing, other meaning making activity, how you made sense of all this, and also the joy.
Yeah, well, I never intended to write a book, but part of my habit is when I go anywhere to a doctor's office or wherever, I would take a notebook with me. And so I visited Jim almost every day of the 2.5 years that he was in memory care. And I had my notebook with me, and I would jot down, trying to understand what in the world was happening to him and what in the world is happening to me as a result of what was happening to him. And so I took notes every day, and I pasted quite a few of them on Facebook. Excuse me, let me get a drink of water. And after Jim's death, I decided, well, let me go back and see what I wrote. And so I had my notebooks as well as my Facebook posts, and I copied and pasted from Facebook to a Microsoft Word document. And I ended up with 89 pages of notes in Microsoft Word. And so I printed them out, and it was like, I don't know what I want to do with this, but something, but it's not this. So one day I was on a webinar for end of life issues. And at the end of the webinar, I said, well, this is not really practice related, but I'm thinking about writing a book. And I wonder if anybody here knows anything about self-publishing. And one of the women came on and said, I know a lot about self-publishing, and I'd be glad to talk with you. So we exchanged numbers, and I called and talked with her. And she had some really interesting, helpful ideas. And I thought, oh, that was really nice. And then a couple of weeks later, this is such a serendipitous thing. She said, Mary, I've been thinking about you and writing that book, and I really like the idea of what you're thinking about doing. And I'd like to help you. And it was like, what? And she said, I would like to support you in writing the book. And I have a friend. This first woman was in Chicago, and the friend that she's talking about was in Ohio. And so I called and talked with her, and it was like, I don't know if I can let this book go. It was kind of like a birth doula giving birth to this book. And it was like, Kim, I don't know if I can let you have it. And she said, Mary, the words are going to be yours. I'll only help you organize it if that's what you'd like. So the book wouldn't have happened without the two of them. They were just great and very unexpected. And another serendipitous thing that happened was like 1 month maybe after Jim went into memory care, a friend who is a hospice chaplain out on the West Coast had written on her Facebook page how writing can be really helpful if you're experiencing grief. And I thought, and then she said, I'll be glad to send you a journal if anybody's interested. It was like, that's probably a really good idea. But I had never kept up with a journal. And I thought, well, maybe this time. So I asked her to send me one. And when she sent the journal, it had a haiku blessing for Mary's journal. And again, it's I had to Google it, a Japanese style poem in 3 lines and 5 syllables on the first line, 7 syllables on the second line, 5 syllables on the third line. So her haiku blessing for me was, may this be holy. May these writings be sacred. May you find healing. And it was that last 5 syllables that just did me in, and I cried and cried and cried. And so that was the birth of the haiku. And then a friend gave me a Reiki session, and it was like someone turned on a faucet. Haiku just started pouring out of me, and I'd wake up even counting syllables in my sleep. It was like the most remarkable thing. So throughout my book, I have lots of haiku that I've printed in there. And then this last slide is my meditation table. So I tried to fortify myself before I would go to memory care. And I went every morning. My habit was going for breakfast with Jim. And I sometimes just needed to steady myself and remind myself. One of the things that I was doing was a loving kindness meditation. And I had to remind myself that I was loving kindness. And I didn't want to roll my eyes at him when he was doing something, what I thought ridiculous. And I didn't want to get angry with him. So this loving kindness meditation, I can remember once I had a fob to open the memory care unit. And I remember standing outside the door, and it had been a really rough morning or something. I had my head on the door and my fob in my hand. And I said, I am loving kindness. I am loving kindness to Jim today. I am loving kindness in the way I look at him. I am loving kindness in my thinking. And I just kind of went through the whole loving kindness. And luckily, nobody came down the hallway and saw me with my head against the door. But it was like when I was done and I said, I am loving kindness, I opened the door and I was ready to go in.
Thank you so much. You know, words fail after hearing you, Mary. I'm wondering, you wanted to read, I think we'd love to have you read just a piece from the book, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. And
Okay.
the other thing is, do you want to speak just very briefly about the title of the book?
Oh, of course, yeah. So the title comes from Jim did not know who I was. So every time I went to see him, I'd say, "Hi, Jim, it's Mary." And this morning that I went to see him, he's sitting outside his room on a bench, and he is all hunched over. His eyes are closed. He's wearing his favorite blue sweater. And I said, "Hi, Jim, I'm Mary. May I sit with you for a while?" There was no response. So I sat beside him and put my hand on his leg, and we just sat there for a while. And then he said, "You make a big good." And so that's the title of my book. It was just Alzheimer's way of saying, "I'm glad you're here," or "Thank you for coming," or something like that. But yeah, I struggled with whether to use it or not, because it was like, okay, so if somebody sees that, what's that going to mean to them? But I don't know. I just kept getting drawn back to it. And there was one day that I considered this for a title as well, but something had happened with Jim, but it wasn't obvious to me what he was happy about. But he said, "Oh, today really joyed me." And I just thought, "Oh, thank you, Jim. I'm so happy. I love it when you're joyed. You joyed me today too, Jim." So, yeah. So that was in a chapter called Meandering of a Mind with Dementia. But the part I wanted to read was a section that is in the sweet moments, tender moments, sacred moments. And I think actually I talked about this, so I don't really need to read it. It was the day when I put the oil on his head, and he said, when I said, "May we know that we are loved," and Jim continued, "I have something to add. We have lots of feelings and hopes." Amen. And I said, "We do have good memories, Jim." I was crying by then, but Jim continued, "Just one more. I hope it stays that way for a long time." We toasted each other with cinnamon coffee cake, which a friend had sent to Jim for a snack. Poignant and sweet and tender and beautiful and sacred and difficult. It felt wonderful to create a moment of joy for Jim.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. We're going to open up for a few minutes so folks can comment, engage, and then we'll wrap up with some, well, I've already mentioned the resources. So let's open up. I'll stop sharing my screen. We have a few minutes. So any comments? I'm not sure, Kathleen, Ethel, how we're doing. I don't see the participants' hands or whatever, but I'm assuming you can simply unmute and ask your question of Mary or any of us.
Emily, we're actually having folks just put questions in the chat if they
Oh,
have
thank you.
questions. So,
Bravo.
there's lots of accolades in there right now for you, Mary.
Oh, thank you. it was quite the process of reading through those 89 pages and saying, I don't know what it is, but it's not this. But Kim, who was in Ohio, would say, Mary, have you thought about doing a chapter on COVID? You had lots of resources to COVID. And in fact, we have 10 new cases of COVID in our residence right now.
Wow.
It's still around.
Wow.
So yeah. Kim especially was helpful in pulling stuff together.
Any comments, any questions? Thank you for the accolades. I join in the accolade. Having Mary. While we're waiting to see if there's any comments or questions, I'm just pulling up the different resources that informed, thinking about this, and the beginning part, reframing joy as meaning making and something purposeful and significant. So Mary talked about creating moments of joy along the Alzheimer's journey, really powerful. And Mary, you said that you literally took a page, you got some ideas. Also, I mentioned Dancing with Elephants and Gesundheit. Of course, Mary's book, You Make a Big Good. And also another one I didn't mention, Caregiving with Laughter, A Husband's Perspective. So these are some of the resources. Let's see. And my information is here if you want to contact me, and so is Mary's. Again, this is recorded. You can find it on YouTube, so you'll be able to get our contact information. But if you wanted to chat with either of us through email, you can reach that way. So I will stop sharing. I think I saw something. Nicole, go ahead. Did you see something in the chat?
So lots of accolades and lots of gratefulness towards Mary. We did have one participant, and this isn't necessarily directed towards Mary, but if you have any input on it, we're of course happy to hear your insight. We did have one participant that asked. She said that she is the caregiver for her 89-year-old grandmother who has 4 living children and only one other offers occasional assistance. She often feels frustrated about that. And she's asking for information about respite care. So we can share a little bit of that. We're happy to share some resources, especially in the follow-up email. We will share some resources specifically about respite care. But I guess just touching a little bit on that feeling of frustration, or, those feelings of resentment that maybe come up, and maybe if you, Emily, or Mary have any kind of advice or insight in offering how to sort of shift that perspective and be able to find that gratefulness and that gratitude and that joy like you guys have so successfully done.
I'll just say that 2 of the resources that I mentioned talk about keeping a gratitude journal, and gratitude being a source of joy and meaning making on the really tough days. So I'm glad you brought that up, Nicole. Mary, I don't know if you want to add. I know you talked about your meditation altar and that ritual of shoring up your strength.
I don't know. I've lost my video, but I can still hear it.
Okay, you can hear us? Can you still hear?
So I'm assuming you hear me.
Yes, we
I
can
can
hear
still
you.
hear
Yeah.
you.
Okay,
so tell me the question you asked me again. Forgotten. What was the question you just asked me?
Just talking about, someone who's experiencing frustration or resentment towards other family members who maybe aren't as supportive, and how to sort of shift that perspective and still be able to find that joy and gratitude in your day-to-day caregiving.
Well, it was really very helpful to me to be in a senior residence. So even when Jim was in memory care and I no longer had the full-time care of him, I was still so exhausted. It was overwhelming. It took over everything. Getting out of bed, actually getting up to see him. And then on one of your previous panelists talked about, oh geez, I'm going to forget what she talked about now. It's gone. It'll come.
It'll come. One of the things, thank you, Mary. One of the things I want to say, Nicole, if it's okay, is I want to give a plug for a program that just launched last month. It's a monthly program, hour and a half each month. There'll be a panel expert talking about different points along the dementia journey. So we have created a dementia map with benches along the way, which are really choice points where the care partners can sit on the bench, look up, and be grateful for what they have, and also start planning and assess their current situation and plan the next steps. So if you would like to learn more about that monthly series, that will be for 6 months. It will go through October. You can reach back, contact me or the Caregiver Support Program, and we can send you the flyer and you can register for that program. You can also get a hard copy of that Dementia Journey Roadmap. It has links to resources at every benchmark, every choice point along the way. We know that there's no one dementia journey that fits all, but there are different things, different steps along the way that are almost universal, like making sure our home is safe, assessing, as Mary talked about a little bit, is it time, to move to assisted living, to a memory care, and then even how can I shore up myself? There's a handrail you'll see on the map, which is about self-care, and Mary gave great examples, of doing photography and nature, and also the meditation, even, Reiki, to take care of herself, to fill her well so that she could go through that door and be with Jim. So join us for that series, and any other supports you'd like, reach back. And I'll turn it over now to the Caregiver Program staff for wrapping up. And Mary, thank you again. I can't thank you enough for.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I would like to add the importance, for me at least, of the support groups. I was so needy. I didn't know how needy I could be, but I was just, I was so exhausted as well. And so I Googled support groups, Massachusetts, support groups, Alzheimer's Foundation of America, Alzheimer's Association. And I probably joined 6 or 8 different support groups over the course of the time that Jim was in memory care. And I also had a geriatric social worker who I used as a therapist.
Great.
And oh my gosh, she was so helpful. It just was a way to pour out my soul. And she was very affirmative. You're doing a good job, blah, 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 which I really needed. I felt so inadequate. So the support groups were great. They might not be that great for everybody, but they were certainly a lifesaver for me.
Thank you for that. Really important. Thanks for having us. And Ethel and your team, thanks for supporting this conference.
Thank you both so much. Yeah, there was a couple questions about the roadmap, Emily, and that and your series that you have coming up. So what we can do is include the flyer for your series coming up in our follow-up emails to everyone. And we'll include your contact info as well, Emily, so that if people have questions specifically or direct questions for you, they can reach you as needed for follow-up. So thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. All right, so before we finish up today, we just wanted to take a couple of minutes. I'm just going to share just a little bit, just a quick little summary of what the Caregiver Support Program does in Baltimore County, in case you aren't familiar already, and then just some upcoming events that we have as well in the future. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so for those not already familiar, the Caregiver Support Program that Kathleen and I are under is a National Families Caregiver Support Program that is federally funded. We are tasked with assisting family and other informal caregivers to care for their loved ones at their home for as long as possible. And so when we talk about the caregivers that we're supporting, there's a few different categories of caregivers that we are able to support. One of them are adult caregivers 18 and over who are caring for individuals that live in Baltimore County who are 60 and older, or those of any age with Alzheimer's disease. We also can support older relatives, not parents, but older relatives who are over the age of 55, who are the primary caregivers for children under the age of 18. So oftentimes this is grandparents, aunts, and uncles. And then additionally, we can support older relatives, including parents who are over the age of 55 that are providing ongoing care for adults ages 18 to 59 with disabilities. So when we talk about the support we're able to provide for caregivers, there's a few different types of services that we offer. So we can provide information and resources of other available services. We can help assist those who are interested in getting access to some of those services. And that is primarily done through our one-on-one consultations with our social worker on our team. She will do a one-on-one phone call with interested caregivers to go over your specific caregiving situation and be able to review any resources or other programs that might be relevant for you. And then we are also able to provide applications for respite stipends when those are available and for eligible individuals. And we provide outreach and education in the community. And so when we are talking about that outreach and education, that is done primarily through different events that we do throughout the community. So in a couple of weeks, we have another virtual event. We're going to be hosting the Baltimore County Public Library System. They have a wide variety of mobile services that a lot of folks don't necessarily know about or take advantage of. So we wanted to be able to share those, particularly with caregivers who may have a little bit harder time getting out into the libraries. So we will be hosting them on June 12th at 10 a.m. That's a virtual meeting. If you'd like to join any of these, you can just reach out to us directly. Our contact info is down there at the bottom. And then each month we go to one of the local Baltimore County senior centers and host resource sessions. So we are present in the senior center and we go through and just talk about different resources that might be available. And while it's not necessarily a support group, these resource sessions, it is sometimes a good opportunity for other caregivers just to come to the senior centers, be together for that hour, talk about resources and be able to share a little bit. Oftentimes it ends up turning into, individuals just sort of sharing what they're going through and just being able to have that space where you're with other caregivers to be able to talk about your concerns. And then starting in July, we are going to be starting a new monthly series. So once a month, we're going to meet virtually, and that's going to be called the Caregiver Connection. And like I said, that's going to be a monthly series. I think if everybody can make sure they're muted, I think we're getting a little bit of echo or feedback. So it'll start in July. It's going to be called Caregiver Connection. We're going to meet once a month virtually with the caregiver support team, and we'll talk about different resources or opportunities that are in the community. And then we will be hosting different experts from the community that will also talk about their knowledge or resources that they might be able to share with caregivers. And again, that'll be virtual. And if anyone is interested in signing up, our contact info is there. You can just reach out and we will get you signed up. And then we also just wanted to let everybody know about our annual in-person conference that's held in November each year. we gather to celebrate National Family Caregivers Month. And so this year we're going to be at the Randallstown Rec Center, and we will be focused on a health and wellness fair for caregivers. So we'll have different pop-up demos and resources and community organizations that will be there sharing about different opportunities for caregivers to take a little bit of time to focus on their own health and wellness. And we will have a keynote presentation on resiliency with Kim Burton. So we will send out more details about that conference as we get a little bit closer. And if anybody, I should note too, if anybody wants to sign up for information as stay on our mailing list, you can always reach out to us.
Great. Thank you so very much, Nicole. And thank you everyone for being here today, to our caregivers, to our aging professionals. We thank you for all that you do, and thank you for taking that time out for yourself today. Thank you to our presenters, providing such wonderful information on how to nourish our minds, our bodies, and our spirit. Thank you to our communications team who have been with us before, during, and will be with us after the conference. We thank them for all their support. I thank my caregiving team, Nicole, who's been my co-lead today for this conference, Sharon Rose, who was online, not sure if she's still with us, but she provides our one-to-one consultations. We have office assistant, Wanda Barksdale, and Emily Kearns is also a part of our team in the office. We are also wrapping up interviews for a new dementia navigator who also help with short-term case management for those families and partners living with dementia. So please fill out, we're going to have a survey link in the chat. So we ask that you please click on that link and provide us feedback about today, what you enjoyed about today, if the information was valuable to you, as well as there's a few questions that we ask about your preferences for events, time of the day, what would best serve you. That really helps us to gear and shape our future events and conferences. So we really would love feedback from you. And not just today, but anytime, there's something that you would like us to present to you, training, skills, we would love to hear from you. So call our office or email us and we'll get back to you right away. So I thank you again. Please reach out to us again for any questions, to sign up for a one-to-one consultation of resources, and please join us for our next upcoming events. Enjoy the rest of your day. And please try to get out there and take a walk in the beautiful sunshine and continue that vital self-care. So thank you again. Take care.